South Korea and Japan's foreign ministers may hold a face-to-face meeting in London as the two attend a G7 ministers meeting ahead of a leaders' summit in June. Now, this would come after Tokyo's foreign ministry issued its annual policy review last week, once again claiming Korea's island of Dokdo as Japanese territory and rebutting South Korean rulings that stated Tokyo should pay compensation for its treatment of Korean women subjected to sexual slavery during the Second World War. We discuss now where Seoul-Tokyo ties are headed amid these historical disputes and the impact on regional security and cooperation. For this, we have Lee Moon-jung, Associate Professor of International Studies at Gwangju National University, and we also connect with Alexander Book, Associate Professor of International Relations at Victoria University of Wellington and author of These Islands Are Ours. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us on the programme today. And with our policy of ladies first, we will start with Professor Lim. Now, Professor Lim, Yoshihide Suga's government in Japan, it's continued the government's tradition, really, of claiming South Korea's island of Dokdo with this diplomatic blue book. And it has done so every year throughout the years, but the current move seems a little out of place, though, given Washington's emphasis on bolstering trilateral ties. How are officials and analysts like yourself reacting to all of this from Seoul? And what does this really tell us about Suga's priorities at the moment?
Well, very unfortunately, as you just explained, this is like another annual event done by, again, the Japanese government, of course, which is not acceptable from our point of view, because especially Dokdo-related issue, it's not a kind of compromisable issue. From our point of view, this is not even a disputable issue. So, of course, we cannot agree with their explanations or their argument. But again, as I just explained, and as you explained, we do see a continuity between the different Japanese government, especially regarding this issue. And having said that, again, as you just highlighted, of course, Washington, especially ever since the Biden administration was inaugurated, of course, the trilateral cooperation has been highlighted. And of course, the Japanese government also does know the importance of the trilateral cooperation, especially to deal with the North Korea-related issues. But again, which is very unfortunate, but that does not necessarily offset those conventional argument. Again, which is very unfortunate.
And what sparks perhaps the most controversy? Well, what sparked the most controversy this year seemed to be Japan's territorial claims. And Korea's earliest claims to Dokdo Island really go back to the 6th century, and even Japanese governments' own surveys and records throughout the centuries, in the 19th century even, they recognize it as Korean territory, or they recognize that it is not Japanese territory. Yet the Tokyo government now, it says Dokdo has been its own islet since the mid-17th century. So a lot of conflicting sort of facts and claims there. Do these claims really add up, or do you see more politics? Are they more political than territorial, do you think, Professor Lim?
Again, as I mentioned, from our point of view, this is not even a disputable issue historically and legally, and it's still under our effective jurisdiction. So this is not, again, the disputable issue, which indicates that whatever their historical arguments or like that kind of, again, the political action, regardless of their argument, again, historically, legally, and of course, for political purposes as well. I mean, again, all Korean people recognize this island as a part of our territory. But the thing is, if I just go back to the San Francisco Peace Treaty, that's one of the major sources that really created kind of rooms for conflicts and again, the controversies between the two countries. But again, that does not necessarily, of course, mean, this is a disputable issue. But what I wanted to just highlight was, again, the San Francisco Peace Treaty created some room for the controversies. But again, I just continue my just that argument, and which is not only my own just argument, that has been our government's and Korean people's view too. Again, this is not a disputable issue.
Right, it's really not up for debate, and the foreign minister actually said, that these kind of claims are futile because Korea, we're not, looking to debate about this. It's a fact for us that Dokdo is South Korean territory. And well, Professor Book, now, why has territorial expansion or these claims why have they been such a crucial policy for Japan throughout the decades? It is involved in a number of territorial disputes.
Yes, this is a very good question. I'm trying to understand that this territorial dispute and other, over Dokdo, but also other issues related to historical memory, they're quite emotional and quite important for Koreans and for Japanese as well. I'm neither Korean or Japanese. I'm trying to take, kind of a third-party perspective on this. I think there are a lot of, if we look at the maps, there are quite a lot of maps published by, Koreans and Japanese from pre-modern times. And it's quite, I'm not a historian, it's difficult to interpret them. We're talking about basically two small islands, but Japan's expansion and Japan's interest, let's put it this way, in territory, but also in this island, started in late 19th century. Japan was the first country to modernize in Asia. And by modernizing, we can mean quite a few different things, but it's also incorporation of these ideas of national territory and the nation. And Japan has been indeed trying, first of all, to delimitate to establish its national territory, and almost at the same time, it embraced this idea of colonialism, which was quite common. We have, the great powers who were all colonial powers then, and Japan basically decided to join the club. So it's really hard in many ways to say where the process of this national territory delimitation ends and where Japan's colonial expansion starts in some cases, not all of them, of course. And I completely agree with Professor Lim that the San Francisco Peace Treaty created quite a lot of room for interpretation, because this was the treaty after Japan's defeat, after Japan's surrender, that was supposed to delimitate Japan's borders, but it created quite a lot of room for interpretation in regards of Dokdo, but also regarding other territories which are currently Japan is disputing between Japan and Russia, but also Japan and China, Taiwan.
And Professor Book, as you mentioned, Japan was very fast to modernize out of among its Asian neighbors. And while the country has a history of aligning itself with dominant Western powers and international regimes, while taking quite a different approach to foreign policy when it comes to its immediate neighbors and non-Western powers like Korea, China and Russia. And its revisionist approach to history and its political elites honouring Class A war criminals, for instance, these acts have been quite controversial. What do you think is the reason for this sort of two-track foreign policy that we see from Tokyo?
Yes, thank you. This is a difficult, very complex question, because when we talk about historical revisionism, we're talking about quite an array of issues. Japan does not have this, obviously, history of colonialism vis-a-vis Western powers. It has a history of war with the United States and other allies. But I guess if we look at again, we can go back to the San Francisco Peace Treaty and the fact that Japan did not have to reckon with its colonial past. And the reason for this is probably the Cold War. So Japan became an important ally for the Western powers, for the U.S. in the Cold War. So this issue of colonialism, of Japan's expansion in Asia, has been put at the back burner or kind of forgotten for a while. And this was more or less not much of an issue during Cold War, when this struggle against communism was the biggest issue that unified the Western, the allies, the capitalist, the democratic countries, including South Korea. But with the end of the Cold War, this pot has been opened. All these issues that had not been dealt with properly, they came out, and I think this is probably one of the reasons. We also have the change of generations in Japan in terms of politicians. The politicians that are in power now, these are people that were born after the war, and these people do not have the actual memory of the war. Quite a lot of them, I think, are nationalistic and revisionist. So, but yeah, so there are quite a few factors to consider there. But I would say, the Cold War is a kind of, this cover that kept all these issues below the surface for a while, and change of generations is probably the two issues that we can think about, factors that we can think about for now.
Professor Lim, well, there's all these recent developments have come as a bit of a disappointment. US allies like South Korea and Taiwan, they're becoming increasingly unsettled by Japan's actions over the past few weeks, with what's happened with its decision to release radioactive wastewater into the Pacific. This has made China very angry. So what would all of this really mean for America's efforts to strengthen its alliances in the Asia-Pacific and pursue regional stability? Do you think it could perhaps worsen tensions with China?
Well, we'll see. Obviously, the radioactive waste issue, of course, they try to keep arguing that this is safe, and which is admitted by IAEA, and Washington also kind of, endorses the decision. So they keep trying to argue that as long as, again, the Washington says it's a kind of, the good, how you just said, the kind of good decision, or like a rational decision, or as long as IAEA says like it's safe, it should be fine. That kind of, again, Japan's, I'm sorry to say like this way, that attitude is really, really frustrating, because they don't really show respect and appropriate gesture to its most important neighbor, again, including Korea and the China and the Taiwan. How about the Philippines, and how about Australia, even New Zealand? We all share the ocean. And this is not only about just technological or legal issues. So I'm really more than just frustrated with that kind of, again, the manner. And having said that, again, we all know the trilateral or regional cooperation is very much important, especially with the new leadership of the United States. But so far, it looks like still Japan's priority is only just Washington, and they really don't show enough, again, I would say, enough respect or enough open-minded manners, again, to its neighbor, which is really sad thing. So having said that, I will just recommend for our government, again, the South Korean government, of course, we don't need to be always just angry about whatever Japan is doing. Of course, Japan is a very much just very, very, very important partner countries for the Korea too. So we absolutely need to keep our again, the manner as open as possible. So, well, we'll see. But the China or this U.S. rivalry is really one big reality. But that does not necessarily mean that, again, that we should really make a war between one and another.
Right,
so it's because.
Right, so both governments, they are looking to ease tensions really amid the urging of Washington as well, and this regional needs as well, all these security issues that we commonly face. But do you see any hope of this happening quite soon? Because both the South Korean and Japanese administrations, they're having elections come up. Do you think either of the two administrations would really be invested in improving their bilateral ties, or do you think Washington is going to have its work cut out?
Well, that's a very good, I would just say, kind of observation, sharp observations. You're totally right. Again, our government is running out of their time, and the Suga administration so far, its popularity approval rating is not that high either. So, and they have many other difficulty, including, again, the Tokyo Olympic, and the COVID situation is really not getting better in Japan either. So, you know, they obviously are losing momentum, or domestic momentum, to really face international difficulty, especially with Korea. Which is very sad thing. But one thing I really want to highlight is Washington's role, even though it is very important, but it would be only limited to, because there are so many issues that are really bilateral. Of course, the Fukushima-related issue is not only about just bilateral relation, it's more about just global issue. But still, we do have many other bilateral issues which really related to our identity politics. So I cannot agree more with Professor Vo, because, you know, generational transition that created another kind of rooms for sometimes misperception or misinterpretations about the other's behavior or their history. So again, to make a long story short, I will say, yeah, it is really difficult to have hope or be very optimistic about the two countries' relations so far. But we'll see. I want to highlight that we should make our efforts to make things better.
Hopefully we will see opportunities for that in these series of G7 meetings coming up. And well, I'm afraid due to my bad time management, we've run over time. So this is where we'll have to end the interview today. My apologies for that. That was Lee Moon-jung, Associate Professor of International Studies at Gwangju National University, and Alexander Burke, Associate Professor of International Relations at Victoria University of Wellington. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, thank you as always for watching.